Hey mushroom nerds, it's Anna McHugh, spending a little bit of time in my yard, and I want to show you some of the mushrooms I've found in the last couple of days. So we just had a tropical storm, Ophelia, pass through the southeastern US, and we got a whole bunch of rain, and therefore we're getting a whole bunch of mushrooms at long last. I am super pumped. It's been kind of a crummy mushroom season, so I want to give you a quick preview. First, I'm going to talk about this lovely edible mushroom, which is in the Tylopilus genus. So this is kind of unusual because a lot of Tylopilus mushrooms are very bitter. So it's good to know which ones are not, and keep an eye out for the tasty ones. I also am gonna throw a destroying angel. No, I'm gonna show you a destroying angel. So this is a mushroom that can be deadly poisonous, and even if you don't die of it, which most people do not, you can suffer permanent organ damage. So this is a mushroom that's really good to know how to recognize. I also have some less toxic and super interesting sulfur tuft mushrooms. So this is a toxic one, Hypholoma fasciculare. I'm also going to make a video of these with my new UV flashlight, because this is one of the species that are really reactive to UV. So I'm going to maybe make my first nighttime video for this channel after 3 years and change. Okay, so before I get deeper into that, oh, and I'm going to smash some Russula mushrooms. So if you have watched this channel before or are familiar with mushrooming, Russula mushrooms are very common, very colorful, and you'll find them any time of year really, and they're great because they grow in yards and a lot of them are bright and very conspicuous. But one of my favorite things to do with them is smash them to bits. The common name for this whole genus is Brittlegill. And these are also mushrooms that are extraordinarily good for activities like mushroom fights and so forth. They're also a favorite with squirrels, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But before I get into all of those things, I want to really quickly show you a t-shirt from my website. It is mushroomanna.com. So I do original botanical drawings and some less botanical drawings of some of my favorite mushrooms. And so if you want to support the channel or, you know, basically keep me in art supplies and kibble for my dogs, please do take a visit. I also have links to some of my educational stuff and, you know, different projects I've done over the years. So it's not just an e-commerce site. Here's another one. This is the shaggy stalked bolete, Boletus betula. And actually, this is a fairly good image of this edible mushroom that is very abundant right now. And so it's basically got a lot of shags on the stem, and it's sort of a nice red to orange yellow color. I do have some other videos about it. So anyway, if you want to do that, I greatly appreciate it, but let's get into our mushroom business. So let's start with this Tylopilus mushroom. So this mushroom, as best as I can determine, is Tylopilus variobrunneus, and that's the variable brown Tylopilus. And so basically what you have here is a mushroom that is in the Boletaceae family. So instead of having gills or like blade-like structures underneath, it has a sponge, you can see. And so a lot of your Tylopilus mushrooms look similar to one another, and many of them are very, very bitter to the taste. And so, you know, when I'm collecting, I often sort of breeze by the Tylopilus mushrooms, especially if it's very busy outside. But I'm really glad that I stopped and collected this one. And so I'm going to share with you how to identify this. So this is a mushroom that's known from, you know, the eastern US. I think it goes all the way north to like the extreme northeast. But anyway, this is a mushroom you can find really commonly throughout the eastern United States, and it looks very much like a mushroom that is also super common called Tylopilus felleus. And so basically both of them are like brownish mushrooms that have this white porous surface underneath. You have a big chunky stem that's really substantial, and then this feature that's really cool. It's called reticulation. And so basically it's just a like sort of fishnet appearance on top of the stem itself. And so, you know, Tylopilus felleus and this mushroom, Tylopilus variobrunneus, the variable brown bolete, share this reticulation, which is one of the reasons that often I see a Tylopilus that has this and I'm like, no, that Tylopilus felleus is really unpalatable. When I say bitter, I don't mean like, ooh, that's a little bitter, but like really, really bitter in your face. So the other features to look out for with this mushroom and also felleus and numerous other Tylopilus species is that they oftentimes bruise sort of a brownish color. Some of them bruise more of a purple color when you damage them. But in the case of this species, that happens quite rapidly. You can see I damaged the porous surface and it starts to sort of turn this, light brown, almost fawn color pretty quickly. The other features you want to look out for, besides that reticulation, is that you tend to have a lighter section on the top of your stem and then it gets darker toward the bottom. And oftentimes, my understanding, at least from, the guidebooks that I just read, you often will see a little sort of crimping or narrowing at the base of the stem. And you can see that right here. This is kind of an unusual specimen for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's just sort of lumpy, bumpy, and weird. And here, let's give you a good view of the cross section of that porous, like, tube layer. Okay, so you have this lumpy, bumpy thing. I'm not going to eat it because this discoloration doesn't look quite right to me. It could just be staining or bruising, but I don't want to really mess around with it. However, I am going to return to that exact same spot because I suspect there are some babies that are going to turn into delightful sort of porcini style mushrooms. So they have a really rich and earthy flavor and aroma. Big fan. Okay, so the main thing that Tylopilus variobrunneus, you can tell I'm trying to encode this, that distinguishes it from inedible Tylopilus mushrooms is the flavor, as I mentioned. So this is a mild one, and in the case of a lot of your Tylopilus and other mushrooms and boletes, a taste test is a very important part of the identification process. You don't swallow your taste test, you just chew and spit. So I'm going to demonstrate. I know what it's going to do because I did it before. Oh, that's interesting. I just brushed my teeth about 20 minutes ago. And so I'm like, ooh, maybe it is a little bitter. And I'm like, no, that's not bitter. That's menthol. But anyway, so if you taste this Tylopilus, and there are a couple of others that are edible and, pretty popular as well, it's just mild. It kind of tastes, it doesn't taste like very much at all. So this is a mushroom that is, really fun to find. Again, this discoloration, I'm not really sure what's going on with that, but I'm not going to bother, just in case. That's the main thing, especially with boletes. These, here, let me show you another one. This is a great example of a bolete type mushroom that, really it came up this morning and it was kind of in nice condition then, and I returned later in the day and it has just taken all kinds of sort of a beating from the habitat around it. It also has another fun feature that a lot of these bolete type mushrooms have, which is it stains blue when you damage it. And that happens really rapidly in the case of this mushroom. So that, I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but the point being you have all kinds of boletes that can be variable, but they also mature really quickly and they become little bug habitats really quickly. So maggots just love to infest the base of boletes. Not all boletes, but many boletes. All right, so I've talked long enough about this that you could see this really gorgeous sort of blue cyan staining. I don't know what this is. I'm gonna go and research it, but I'm running out of light and I wanted to show you my other stuff. And I'm learning actually that doing mushroom videos at my house is super fun because I can look at all of my books and cross-reference, and anyway, I will try not to get too deep. But, all right, so I did want to show you one other mushroom with a blue bruising reaction. So this is another bolete type mushroom, and it's really hard to identify these ones that have sort of reddish and reddish to orange pores. So I'm not going to get too deep into that. There is a local who calls these mushrooms scarlatinas because it's kind of hard to nail down what they precisely are. I have a confession to make. I started to cut into it without talking about this. I was going to tell you. Okay, so one of the other reasons you might want to visit my website and get yourself a t-shirt is that I go through mushroom knives very rapidly, and I was getting myself set up to do this video, and I started scrounging, and I get mushroom knives, like usually I buy them not in bulk, but I'll buy 4 or 5, and I go through them really quickly. But anyway, I couldn't find them. But I do have a good friend who I met at the Georgia Mushroom Festival last year named John Morehouse. And he gave me these throwing stars, and they have been in my mushrooming pack since, gosh, I guess it was May of 2022. And I realized that, like, this is actually a pretty nice sharp implement. So anyway, the mushroom knives that I purchase are not expensive, and that's a recommendation I make. Like, there are some really nice mushroom knives out there, and what constitutes a mushroom knife, by the way, is like a little folding knife that has a sort of hooked blade, and is really good for, perfect example, popping up a mushroom from the base, like this destroying angel. You need to collect all of it in order to get a good ID. And so mushroom knives, they have a little hook on them, so it's really nice for digging and popping things up, and then a little brush on the other end. And some of them are very fancy, you know, like Italian made and beautiful, carvings and all kinds of amazing stuff that I am not responsible enough for. And so I buy like $10 to $12 maximum, I think they're more like 8 mushroom knives on Amazon, and I just store them until I run out of them, and I evidently have done that. Okay, so nonetheless, thank you, John Morehouse, for your throwing stars. They are keen blades, and I'm going to use it to slice open this scarlatina and show you just how rapidly it turns blue. And by way of contrast with this other blue staining bolete, this stains so rapidly that, like, as soon as you start to cut it, it erupts with color. But also the blue is way darker and almost turns like a blackish blue by the time it's done with its staining reaction. So let's see if I can do one that is fast enough where I cut it and you can see it race across. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can, that's one of my favorite things to do. You know, mushrooms are just so ephemeral in and of themselves, but being able to be like, for the next 1.5 seconds, I can observe this thing happening. And I just love these oxidization and coloring things that mushrooms do. All right, so we have talked about our Tylopilus variobrunneus. Also wanted to shout out the authors of this species. This is one of the things that, like, further into mushroom land you go, you start following different mycologists and their careers. And so that is a species that was published by the Bassett's and also Bill Rudy. And so they are prolific authors and experts in especially mushrooms of the eastern US. But it's always fun to be like, I have an ID, and right at the top of the entry, I have names that I'm really familiar with, and I can associate with beautiful faces of people I've met at nerdy events. And that's why you should all be mushroom nerds and join mushroom clubs and go to go to forays, all that fun stuff. All right, so I'm sorry, I'm kind of pumped up. I had coffee at roughly 4:45, and we're now at 6:30, so I'm peaking, if you will. It's gonna be a rad night. All right, so let's talk about this dangerous mushroom. So this is a young specimen of most likely Amanita bisporigera. And I say most likely because there are a few different species in the eastern US that are referred to commonly as destroying angels. And they share a very dangerous toxin called amatoxin. So it's amanitas produce, not all amanitas, but some amanitas contain amatoxins. And those are very, very dangerous compounds that basically, when you consume the mushroom, after a few hours, you start to feel sick. You expel the mushroom either upwards or downwards, and then you start to feel better. But while that is happening, the amatoxins start to do damage to your liver, and it can cause cell death and a lot of like really, really awful effects. So you want to become familiar with the Amanita genus in general, and that's our, they're cap and stem mushrooms. They have gills. This one, actually, here, let me show you what gills are just in case. So here's an agaricus mushroom that's a little worse for wear, and I am not going to talk about it today for that reason. I think I can find some fresher ones because I don't know where they're growing. But anyway, when I say gills, what I mean are these little blade-like structures, like by way of contrast with those sponges. And so all Amanitas have gills, and all Amanitas are also, have some sort of material at the base of the stem, and it can vary a great deal. But the mushrooms you want to be very, very mindful of from like being dangerous and toxic is a section of the Amanita genus called the Phalloideae. And so Amanita phalloides, that is the death cap mushroom, is sort of the species that typifies the Phalloideae section. Or so basically what you have are mushrooms that have this really distinct cup of tissue at the base. And in addition to that, with destroying angels, you have a mushroom that is overall white. So if this one is young, so I'm going to take it apart in a second, but when we see the gills, they're going to be white. We are going to have a ring on the stem that is white, cap is white and matte and not, not slimy, not sticky. And then you have this white cup at the base of the stem. Now, not all mushrooms, not all Amanitas that have a cup at the base of the stem are dangerous. However, if you are new to mushroom hunting in general, learn the Amanita genus and then just don't bother with eating it for a while. I do recommend, however, studying the Amanita genus, because even though it's like so much new research happening all the time and it can be hard, it's also, the mushrooms are really remarkable and striking. And so if you're like learning how to study the features of a mushroom, like gill color and all the different things, Amanitas are great because they have a lot of classic mushroom features and they're often really pronounced. And so oftentimes, like, it's observing the, most exaggerated form of what you can see with more subtle mushroom genera. So anyway, you want to avoid this critter, and I want to show you a baby. So, the destroying angels, there are some that are much larger, but as you can see, it's just a little dude here. And less than a day ago, that little dude was inside of this cup. So that's called a universal veil. And that's the feature on Amanita mushrooms that leaves something at the base. And, the something can be a bulb, the something can be a cup. But, in this case, it's like comes out of a little egg. I'm gonna grab me a skinnier ninja star here. Throwing stars are not my forte. I haven't practiced with them at all, which is probably good. I have enough hobbies and none of them are violence oriented, and I'm not gonna start now. Okay, so you can see there's just this like little egg and this little baby mushroom popping out. But when you are collecting mushrooms in the field, sometimes, I'm just gonna remove this little cap here, sometimes what you'll see on the ground is more like a little chunk like this. It looks like a little egg because it is a little egg and the baby mushroom is inside. And that can look like a puffball mushroom. And puffball mushrooms are edible, and you, in general want to be very careful about that distinction. Fortunately, it's quite easy. Like if you slice open something that's a little lumpy, bumpy thing, even with these very white Amanitas, you can usually see an outline of the cap and even sometimes like rudimentary gills and where the gills are going to be and where the stem is going to be. Whereas the inside of a puffball is just sort of like, I look like styrofoam or tofu, like I have no features inside of me whatsoever until I turn into, poofy spore mass. Okay, so that's Amanita bisporigera. I'm gonna talk to you about the Hypholoma because I said I was going to do that. Okay, so I collected this one yesterday. Hypholoma fasciculare is, you know, a toxic mushroom. It's not one of those mushrooms that I hear about people actually getting poisoned with routinely. You know, they are quite common and they grow on wood in these little clusters, and you have sort of a yellowy, dingy, you know, cap surface here, and it can be a little bit roughened, but you know, you don't have warts or anything like that. And then underneath, you don't have any sort of like rings on stems or any features there. The stems are pretty fibrous and pretty robust considering how skinny they are. And then you have really tightly packed little gills that start out pale, sort of like a little bit lighter than the top of the cap. But as they mature, they sort of turn a greenish color. And then by the time they're fully mature and sporulate, I'm trying not to destroy it so I can UV treat it later, but you can see it's sort of like a dark brownish color by the time they're mature. So this is a really fun mushroom to find because you can often encounter really large fruitings of them, and they're really fun to photograph, but you do want to avoid them from an edibility perspective. I think the reason, honestly, that there aren't, you know, I wouldn't consider this to be a mushroom of concern, like if I'm teaching people foraging, is because there aren't a lot of lookalikes that are desirable edibles. And so, you know, this is one of those that I really enjoy finding because aesthetically, I find mushrooms that cluster from the base to be delightful, with the exception maybe of the ringless honey mushroom, Desarmolaria cespitosa, but that is because it's a highly invasive species and it kills my trees, and even though it clusters from the base and it looks very tidy, it is not a tidy mushroom overall. Okay, let's see, did I promise you anything else? Yes, I promised to smash some Russulas. I don't need my throwing stars for this trick. I'm almost out of light, but I promise that I will be doing more videos with some fresh agaricus mushrooms. I also have some Suillus mushrooms to share, one of my favorite genera. They're just like funky and slippery sometimes, and they're just great, and people don't love them enough, and a few other things, of course. Like, it's just gonna go bonkers for the next few days, so I'm very excited. Okay, so as is tradition in not just my life, but I think most mushroomers' lives, Russula mushrooms are really fun to find and they're fun to smash. And so if you're not familiar, Russula mushrooms grow really frequently with pine trees. And when I say Russula, I am talking about an entire genus of mushrooms, and there are a whole lot of them, hundreds of them. And a lot of them are either unnamed or it's really impossible to determine which one it is without using a microscope or doing genetic analysis. So if you're like me and you really are like out in the field and do what you can with guidebooks and on forums, you know, oftentimes you'll be like, it is a red Russula mushroom, and I am willing to leave it there. And most people would be more than satisfied with that answer. As a matter of fact, if somebody on a forum starts saying that they know how to identify red Russula mushrooms, I tend to look at their post history and kind of see whether or not they're a Russula expert. Because, you know, anyone who claims mastery of mushrooms is probably not an expert. Is kind of ironic that way, but like, because we're discovering new ones all the time and many of them don't have names, it would be really just inaccurate to say that anybody has mastery. All right, so enough about that and semantic precision. So you have Russula mushrooms in all kinds of colors, but a lot of them are this sort of bright reddish color. We have pink ones, and many times you get this particular variety, again, I don't know what it is, gets these really attractive like little yellowy discolorations as it matures. Underneath you have white gills and no ring on the stem, and again, it's really brittle, and so like if you start to touch a Russula, it'll start falling apart almost immediately. When they're fresh, and these are not fresh, and when I say fresh, when they are not completely eaten by maggots on the inside, so let's open this fella up and I will show you. So you can see this has just been munched on a bit. Oh, we don't have a lot of maturity here, but like there's definitely been bug damage here, and so it's like completely soft. Same thing with this. You can see a hole. Someone went inside. Let's see if they're still home. Thank goodness not. Okay, so, you know, these are kind of halfway in between. A lot of times you'll open them up and they're just like hollow on the inside, and all you can see is the like discoloration of, you know, little maggots eating their way out and turning into flies. But, you know, even in the case of, oh, here's one that I think is pretty fresh. Okay, nope. Sorry. I think you're the best. Okay, so I had that collection of red ones. We also have a lot of Russulas that are in varying colors. So we have a lot of purples. I really love Russulas that are sort of reddish purple and then get these little flashes of yellowish color or flashes of some other color. So like there's a really beautiful one that's sort of like greenish purple that gets a little flash of color here called, oh God, I don't remember what it's called. Anyway, it grows in the yard and I really love it because it has this extra little, you know, pizzazz to it. But, you know, when you're looking at a Russula, again, you know, white gills, white stem, some of them have colored stems, but most of them are white stems, and then they snap open like a piece of chalk. So I don't know if my microphone caught that, but here we go. So, oh, we'll snap it. And that's a real dead giveaway for Russula. They grow really fast. You'll see them almost every time of year because there's so stinking many of them. And I'm going to smash some more of them. This is one of the more satisfying. Like, I love the fact that my hobby is so low impact. Like, when I talk about my equipment woes and that I don't have what I really want to go mushroom hunting, I'm talking about like $9 knives. Or I'm talking about bug spray. I'm not talking about ATV fuel. I'm not talking about, you know, skis or yachts. So this is the cheapest entertainment there is, and environmentally friendly too. And a lot of fun to smash up mushrooms. And so I'm going to give this a toss, see if I can get it to explode. The last thing I wanted to say about Russulas is that some of them are very spicy. Let's do a really quick, actually a quick taste test. So besides with those Tylopilus mushrooms, Russulas are the other mushrooms that I tend to, if I'm curious, taste test them. So some of them are very, very spicy. Yeah. Very, very spicy and sort of peppery. And it's not super. And so, you know, you can't eat those. They're very acrid. That's the word that you'll see in guidebooks. But there are also tons of Russulas that are mild, and some of them that are quite delicious. Lots of different ways of preparing them. You know, as with Tylopilus and a lot of Suillus that I was talking about, like much maligned and perhaps underappreciated from an edibility perspective. So, you know, you want to go for really fresh specimens that aren't spicy, and you also want to investigate, like there's a few of them that disagree with people. So, you know, that's an area to explore, and the abundance is just off the you know, off the charts with Russulas. So that's always fun. I think I have run out of time and run out of light, but I appreciate your time. I hope you find a billion mushrooms. Let's talk again soon. And I will do my darndest to make some UV footage of some glowing things for you soon. In the meantime, be well and yeah, enjoy the rest of your week.